Blade is a former national champion of Canada in track and field heptathlon with a PhD in kinesiology. For the past 26 years, she has run a private consulting business as sport performance professional coach in Edmonton, Alberta, working with athletes in over 15 sports, beginner to elite. Since 2014, she served as president of the board for Athletics Alberta, and I think that's just come to an end. So that's 9-year term has just finished, which has been very involved in that at that level. And then recently, in a bid to increase public awareness of the threat posed by gender identity ideology, Linda partnered with journalist Barbara Kay to author a book titled Unsporting: How Trans Activism and Science Denial Are Destroying Sport. So we'll put a link to that book in the chat. So thank you so much, Linda, for coming to update us and give us news from Canada. And over to you.
Thank you. Happened in Canada on September 20th, Wednesday. Parents in Canada were encouraged to take their children out of school and march in the streets to protest the teaching of gender identity ideology in the schools. Called the 1 Million March for Children. And I hadn't even heard of this group until sometime in the late spring of this year. Image shows some of the poster that they put out. And it's done under the organization is called Hands Off Our Kids. And if you just look carefully, together we're united in solidarity, sending a message to all governments, hands off our kids. The movement embraces principles of human dignity, freedom of thought, and religious freedoms. Our mission includes safeguarding children's rights. And you can go down and see that they don't want their children indoctrinated with gender identity ideology. So it was very clear, the message is pro-family. A lot of different religious groups showed up, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, but also many secular people and just general parents of school children. So the next slide. There was a woman and a man, they're both from the Islamic community. The Bahira Abdul Salam is an engineer, and they're both from Ontario. She's in Toronto. And the next slide shows Kamal El Sheikh is the gentleman that worked with her. And they're also, I think he also lives in Ontario. And I guess they had been working on this behind the scenes for quite a while, but the women's groups, we didn't even know this was happening. Anyway, it's good. And we all kind of join hands, many different organizations. So next slide, map of Canada. And the blue dots show you all the different marches across the country, like how many. They started thinking they could get it done in 12 cities. And when I counted on their list, the actual number of cities that had marches that day was 102. So it just exploded. The need to speak out in Canada has clearly, it's come to a head, and they've really, everybody's really jumped into this. So next images. So we're going to start with images from Ontario, from various cities in Ontario as I speak. So the next slide shows the crowd of people who just want accountability. This is in Ottawa, by the way. This is our national capital, Ottawa. Massive, massive crowd. I think that was the biggest crowd. And very small crowds were counter-protesting the parents, the rainbow, like the chevron flag. And of course, the media always said like they were the same numbers, but there's no way. There was this crowd, and there might have been a handful of like maybe 20 to 50 people always on the other side. Next slide. Posters. Everybody was happily doing their posters. LGB, stop transing the gay away. If genitals don't define gender, how does removing them affirm it? Great posters. Next slide. Never trust anyone who says don't tell your parents. Groomers. Queen's Park. This is in Toronto itself, near the main hall, the legislative building there. And this is, I think, where the organizers, one of them was there. Okay, and the next.
We also run a private school, and I also teach
You can hear somebody saying, leave our kids alone. And that was a common chant across the country. Next slide, please. A capture of the president of the Labour Council, the local union in Ontario. They were caught. A meeting was leaked that they were contacting and directing Antifa to go against the protesters and the parents. So obviously the labor unions were not on our side. Right away, they went to the other extreme, which was interesting. Next slide. And after the fact, this is our Bell Canada, one of our networks, the telephone company, is offering sessions in case people had hurt feelings after the marches, that they could get a healing session through the telephone company, which I found just, I found this one of the most hilarious outcomes. Anyway, that was the situation in Ontario. And now let's move across the country to the next slide. So this one was in Saskatoon. I just wanted to show you an image from there. I believe this was in Saskatoon. And one of our women who is on WDI Canada has now written a Substack about all of this. And if you look at the next slide, I believe it's on, yes. So she goes by Shar Kate. And this is Saskatchewan, the storm, SOGI storm. SOGI, of course, as we know, mean in Canada, there's a curriculum called SOGI 123, sexual orientation and gender identity. And so you'll see a lot of the signs in all of these next few images saying no SOGI 123, because this is the actual curriculum coming from the Yogyakarta UN people through the Canadian bureaucracy, I suppose, education system. And so, yeah, this is the big one. So you might want to check out Shar Kate over the next, and on genderdescent.com. In this particular province, the premier, the premier of the province has put through a bill that will make it parents must be informed if a child wants to have a new name and new pronouns. And a judicial ruling just said they can't do that. And so this Premier Scott Moe, if you go to what Premier said, our government extremely dismayed by the judicial overreach. The best interest of the children is to ensure parents are included in their children's education, in their classrooms, and in the important decisions involving their children. This is the statement. And now, because of the blockage from the courts, because Canadian courts are all captured as well, this premier is going to go to almost taking this to a constitutional crisis. So if you go to the next, use the notwithstanding clause to override the judge. And this is the most extreme thing a premier can do. To invoke the notwithstanding clause means that he sees it, that he can override a judicial ruling. And of course, all the woke, or I guess normal legacy mainstream news outlets are saying that this is, there should be no reason why the premier should do this, and this is unnecessarily overreaching with the Constitution and blah, blah, blah. But you can see how now even some leaders in this country are starting to get the idea and then realize what's going on. And we're heading into a couple of years of really interesting conflict. So let's go on to my area of the country, which is in Alberta. And I'm in one of the where the blue dot is, I guess, in the central part of the province. We have a massive part of the province is far north. So the blue dot at the very top of this is where the oil sands are. Anyway, so the first one is in the city of Calgary, which is to the south of me. And then the next one, I believe, is the Edmonton crowd. And let the video run. You'll see their signs. These are just great people, normal people.
My kids, my choice!
My kids, my choice!
Cameras on the teachers!
waving my flag. So it was fantastic. And by the way, that group that was walking through, the crowd was so big, it took 10 minutes for all of them to walk through. So that was just a small clip of a 10-minute, so many, I think it must have been at least 5,000 to 10,000 people. I mean, just walking and walking past. Next all counter protest crowd. And imagine that the media was saying the crowds were the same size. It's quite a joke. And I want you to notice that building behind, okay, you see the chevron flag, the progress flag, and then you see the title on that building is the Alberta Teachers Association. So the Teachers Association was literally saying they were on the side of the counter protest. And that big flag was on their parking lot, their parkade for the Teachers Association. They put up the big flag. The big protest was opposite side of the street. So it was a big middle finger to the parents. And then something happened. I think a couple guys from the parents' protest got over to that parkade and ripped the flag down. Somehow they got that flag off there. So it was kind of turned into a game of steal the flag. And now I want you to see the next image. So now the Edmonton police are looking for these two guys who took the flag down, and they're being accused of, these are hateful people that they have to find. They have to find these two guys. Anyway, it's just so silly. The whole thing is silly. Over to the West Coast, and we have images from Vancouver and Victoria. Megan Murphy was in the one at the furthest west, but let's go was showing even in the lead up on the day before. You'll see on the September 19th, she was showing emails from BC Human Rights Commissioner saying that this thing was hateful, that there's anti-trans, denying the existence of trans and gender diverse people. So what they were already starting to try to tell the public that be careful, there's a bunch of hateful marches coming up. Anyway, the next one, just sight and sound, Vancouver. I believe this was Vancouver. Yeah, and peaceful till it got to Megan Murphy in Victoria. And
Nonsense ideology that claims the impossible. That individuals can change sex through self-declaration. That claims it is possible to be born in the wrong body. That says if a girl or a woman sees a man in their change room, and that
trans activists and Antifa invade the parents and the crowd where Megan Murphy was speaking. And then the police forced the protesters to the parents' side, Megan's mic, to be shut off because they said that it wasn't going to be safe anymore. So suddenly they were worried about safety after they let all of these Antifa people in and caused, a bit of a confrontation physically. So everything across Canada was peaceful until that moment. We almost made it. It was the farthest, just before the Pacific Ocean, and all of a sudden all hell broke loose. But anyway, University of Victoria, where Megan was speaking there, was talking again about protests against trans and in schools were taking place against cities across Canada. Oh, I guess this was in the preamble as well. And it was hate-fueled movements. It's always hate-fueled movements. Anyway, Prime Minister weighs in. Our lovely Justin Trudeau. Let me make one thing very clear. Transphobia, homophobia, and biphobia have no place in this country. We strongly condemn this hate and its manifestations, and we stand united in support of blah, 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 Canadians across the country, and you are valid and you are valued. And then finally, after a day or two, it took a while, the leader of the opposition, which is the Conservative leader, came back Okay, next slide. Always devise and to distract from all he has broken. This time he is demonizing concerned parents. Parents should be the final authority on the values and lessons that are taught to children. Trudeau should butt out and let parents raise their kids. So we now see the little bit of, now there's opposition. A conservative government was never stopping all this until this year. So this is very good news that there's going to, like, the some parties at least are standing up, starting to anyway. Next slide. And it's just big hurrah and thank you to everybody. And it was so successful. There's going to be another march on, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, October 23. So this is only beginning. It's not stopping. And at the Abbotsford School Board, I think 2 nights ago, there were about 500 parents trying to stop the school board from making a rule about enforcing SOGI 123. And the school board barely squeaked out a win, and the parents erupted, and the police had to escort the board members out. I think Canadian parents, it's safe to say, I think the cat is out of the bag, as we say in English. You can't put it back in the bag. I think this is really the moment of big change in Canada, I hope. It's going to take, there's so much damage has been done, so many rules and laws and legislation. It's probably going to take us a decade to unravel everything. But I'm very hopeful. I think this is the turning point, at least it feels like it. So thank you for letting me share.